I ordered my hot sauce an hour ago.
Few things in Hollywood have felt as destined for one another as James Bond and Christopher Nolan. However, for as fated for each other as these powerhouses of blockbuster cinema have seemed, their paths have never crossed. By the time Nolan had made a name for himself in Hollywood, Bond had already settled into a long-term relationship with Daniel Craig, and although Nolan's style would have suited his take on Bond quite well, Nolan made it clear that he would want his version of Bond to be its own thing, unencumbered by other filmmakers' take on the character. But now the time feels right. After 17 years, Eon is in the market for a new Bond, and Nolan, on the top of his game following Oppenheimer, has nothing on his slate for the foreseeable future. This is the time, and I couldn't be more amped. My two favorite things in all of cinema coming together at long last. It's the stuff that dreams are made of. But perhaps I should be more careful what I wish for, because while this is something I've wanted basically my entire life, the rumors regarding a potential Christopher Nolan James Bond movie and what it would look like raise a few concerns.
$20 says you're going to direct the next Bond movie.
$20.
This rumor, the Christopher Nolan James Bond rumor, I feel like actually has some weight to it. Whether or not it's going to go down the way that he's kind of indicating it is, remains to be seen. But the fact of the matter is, Bond is at a turning point now, right? They finished the Daniel Craig era. They're going into this new era with a new actor, new direction, all that stuff. You don't really know what it's going to be like, but it would, given the fact that Christopher Nolan has expressed interest in, James Bond. I mean, he's
repeatedly
even said as much, like multiple times, that he's like shamelessly ripped off those films like throughout his entire career.
The influence of those movies on my filmography is embarrassingly apparent. I've always loved the character and the movies, and anybody who's seen my other films, it's embarrassingly clear how much I love the movies.
If you look across his filmography, he's not shy about it.
No attempt to shy away from that.
He also just so happens to be the biggest name in directing right now. Like, no offense to Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, but like, they're not drawing in crowds the way Christopher Nolan is.
It sort of seems like this is the first time in Christopher Nolan's sort of career where the job's open for him to do exactly what he wants to do with it.
Yeah.
And he's got enough clout that he could literally ask to do it and they would consider it.
Maybe he'd be ready to get back into franchise filmmaking at this point. I mean, at least this franchise. I don't think he's not going to jump over to Star Wars or something like that. It would have to be James Bond.
Yeah, and I don't think he's going back to superheroes anytime soon. So.
God, no. I think he's actually said that he's never touching superheroes ever again.
And when you've made that sort of statement, you don't really need to make another one.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, let the work stand for itself.
It's gone.
There's a deal apparently being negotiated for Nolan to direct 2 Bond films, writing both of them as well. But the key points that are being made here are that Eon and Amazon are pushing for Nolan and that he's on board in principle unless his need for creative freedom isn't met, which, obviously we know if Nolan doesn't get carte blanche with a Bond film, he's probably not going to do it. Another point is that Eon wants a full reboot for the modern era, with Nolan wanting to make adaptations of the Ian Fleming novels in period settings. This is very important because this is a big topic of discussion here, that stick close to the original source material. It's also unclear as to what Amazon wants, apart from money, it cheekily says. But this is the final point here, is that the goal is to get Nolan to do 2 to 3 films, makes sense, and then have him executive produce going forward. Eon and Amazon are putting all of their eggs in one basket for Nolan due to the fact that he wants the job. He delivers critically and commercially successful films, and he's one of the few directors out there who can put butts in seats on his name alone, as we've kind of already mentioned.
You go through the list of things in this article, and I'm like, yes, Christopher Nolan, they want him. I want him too. And yes, make him do a couple, 2 or 3. Sounds great. The big sticking point for me is the period setting. I vehemently do not believe that Bond should become... I actually think it would kill the franchise if they decided to make them period pieces going forward. I think that is you could say goodbye to people's interest in this character. He becomes a relic of a bygone era, in the same way that something like Sherlock Holmes and whatever else. Like you sort of pigeonhole him in this period of time, and beyond that, I mean, I feel like we're also at a point in time where, because you know the world is constantly changing, where people are like, well, you know, Bond has some sort of like, you know, sort of antiquated attitudes. They're sort of ingrained in some of the source material.
Man talk.
I don't see how you make that debate any better by pivoting into it, by saying, oh yeah, you think Bond's sexist? We're going to adapt the fucking books written in the 50s.
But
verbatim. And it's like, yeah, this doesn't do that. I mean, I feel like you're going to turn a lot of people off, which I don't know if this franchise can afford to do right now, just because, you know, you look at No Time to Die, which did very well at the box office, but where it didn't do so well, and where a lot of these sort of franchises, it's in a similar position to Mission Impossible, really, where it's like, people over a certain age love it, and people under a certain age just don't go see them. And, you know, despite what Twitter will have you sort of believe. But
Twitter is not a good litmus test for...
It is not. It is absolutely...
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
It's
Like,
not a good
I think
indicator.
they need to do outreach to younger viewers, and this is just not how you do that, in my opinion.
I get what you're saying, because you're right. Like, Bond, like, out of all of these literary characters, literary works, and whatever, you mentioned Sherlock Holmes or whatever, Bond is really the only one that hasn't been trapped in the era he was conceived in. And I think that's part of the appeal of the franchise, is its constant way of reinventing itself with every era. It's kind of...
they're like time capsules. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It evolves with the times. The character kind of stays the same at the core of it, but the world around him changes, and that's kind of... I mean, you've heard filmmakers talk about this all the time. For Daniel Craig talk about that all the time. That is the big sort of thing with the character. Here's the thing. Christopher Nolan doing a James Bond film, that is literally... I have wanted that my entire life. Like, more than anything else. Would him be doing a 60s adaptation of, like, I don't know, From Russia with Love or Moonraker be my ideal version of this? No, but I'm also down to hear him out on it, because he's earned that goodwill from me. What if he did like a retro 60s sort of thing, like a, you know, like what we saw with The Incredibles, where it was like, it's clearly taking place in a period that is like in the past, but there's sort of like this weird like futuristic spin on some of the tech. Like, I don't know, like if they're gonna go down this route, that's where I'm like, okay, I could see like a retro 60s sort of thing working, and like we're taking advantage of that time period, but we're separating ourselves from Russia with Love, an On Her Majesty's Secret Service, a Dr. No, or whatever, you know?
I think then it becomes a different problem for me, where it's like, oh, this just does not take place in the real world at all. This is an alternate reality where, like, you know, like The Incredibles, where it's like like the 2000s and the 1960s at once. And or like something like Batman the Animated Series, which does something similar with like the 1940s and
Dude,
the
but
90s.
people love that stuff, though.
Yeah,
It
no, people love that
resonates still.
stuff, but I mean, I think it works a little better in like the pulpy comic book kind of thing. And also, I think Bond, and this is the thing, right? This is the big issue. I think Bond exists as he was created as a contemporary sort of figure, and like when he was written, that was sort of what's made him stand apart. Like, Fleming was writing this character when every other action hero in like sort of that kind of genre was kind of this throwback. It's like, oh, they take the, you know, turn of the century, and they're all, you know, sort of old-timey man's man kind of guys. And then Bond was this very contemporary, very of his time, 1950s, which at the time was contemporary, man who, you know, had sort of sex when he wanted to, and he drank, and he was a bachelor, he didn't settle down, and like all of these things that felt very new at the time. And then what was smart about the films is they basically said, that's the essence of this character, and as we move away from his original publication date, we're not gonna deny him that. Bond is just going to change and become whatever you know, that version of modernity is in his time. There's a really good quote from Barbara Broccoli where she says, whatever men are at the time the Bond film is made, that's what Bond is. And then the same with the technology. You know, part of the appeal of the Bond films is they have these cool, you know, cars and pieces of tech, and all the clothing everyone wears is very contemporary and of its time. And you just strip all of that away. All the tech's going to have to be stuff that my smartphone could probably do.
Yeah.
And Bond's going to act like, oh wow, what a revolutionary piece of tech cue. This is amazing.
Well, I don't know if it would be.
I don't know. You could make a wireless call. What an incredible device. I don't think you make a new generation of Bond fans the way that like GoldenEye made a new generation of Bond fans with a period set Bond film. I think it becomes kind of this little like cultural curio where it's like, oh yeah, wasn't that nice when they went back to the 60s?
I get what you're saying, that like keeping it modern is how you introduce new fans, is how you get people on board to this sort of thing. At the same time, I know it's kind of a different case, but like Mad Men is and was insanely popular. People were down for it because of the characters. It's like I don't necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, people love period dramas. The Crown was insanely popular. I don't think you're alienating younger audiences just because you're choosing to set this film at a different time period. I mean, there are younger audience members who are clamoring for a Fantastic Four set in the 60s. Like there is this kind of like yearning to have period pieces with these characters. I'm not saying that like I agree with it or that I think it's like the best thing to go about, because I agree with what you're saying about we've had those films in the 60s. We've seen what that landscape looks like. I don't want like the character to go back to that, because the great thing about him is being a man of the current times.
People already think of Bond as being kind of antiquated anyway, and then you confirm that. You're basically just saying, yeah, this is your dad's franchise,
But it's not like
we'll
this would
die
be the
with your dad.
standard.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
like it would be for like 2 or 3 films. Like
it would be, but then once the floodgates open, I just don't see how you go like, okay, now we're going back to modern day ones. It's like, remember those ones that were set in the 60s? I don't know. I just feel like it's just.
But like Nolan, he did the same thing with Batman. You know what I'm saying? Like they're like that was like a hyper realistic Batman thing, and like we haven't seen anything like it since.
I just can't get past the pastiche thing. It would feel like Austin Powers. It would literally just feel like that. It would feel like, they're going to do the Spectre boardroom exactly like it was in Thunderball.
The only 2 films that I would be down to see reimaginings of, I don't want them to take place in the 60s, but I'd like to see reimaginings of, or I guess 70s, because these 2 movies came out in the 70s, is like a true adaptation of Live and Let Die that is contemporary, and Moonraker.
I agree, and I think actually with Moonraker is that's my favorite of the books, and I think it's the one that they probably could get away with doing more of a straight adaptation of, just because so little of it was used. Obviously, they did a bit in Die Another Day, but they went off the rails there. But
we don't talk about that.
but honestly, this is another point in the favor of doing it contemporary. Hugo Drax is just Elon Musk. And you lose that bit of commentary when you say, actually, it takes place in the 60s. And it's like, okay.
I could see Nolan wanting to do an adaptation of Moonraker because of its relevancy. But because he wants to do an adaptation of Moonraker does not mean that means that film is going to be set in the 60s or the 70s or whatever. Like that movie could be contemporary and still be a true direct adaptation of Moonrakers.
I see what you mean. So you think maybe that this is them sort of extrapolating on what the source has said, or inferring they're taking direct adaptation, taking it to mean period.
Yeah, because I just don't buy that Nolan would be like, I'm gonna do a period. Yeah, like I don't think Nolan would be like, I'm gonna do a period accurate James Bond trilogy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, I get Nolan is fond of like old tech. He likes film. He likes, telling very old fashioned, or maybe not old fashioned, but yeah, he's a bit of a retro guy. He's an analog guy, but I don't think that necessarily translates to his like thematic pursuits or his filmmaking pursuits. I mean, Tenet is about as like modern of a fucking blockbuster as you can get. The guy who made Tenet, I don't think necessarily wants to go back to the 60s for a direct adaptation of James Bond. If you're asking whether or not I buy that aspect of it, I don't buy it. I mean, if we're just entertaining the idea, that's another conversation. But I think it's more of a adaptation of one of those novels that could benefit from a contemporary adaptation.
This is the thing about being a fan, and this is, it kind of poisons your brain a little bit, but you do sometimes have to sort of balance, like, what you think is best for the thing you like, and what you'd like to see. And although, here's the thing, with this period thing, I don't think it's good for the series, and I don't want to see it. So I have absolutely no reservations. And as much as I want to see Christopher Nolan do this, because, I mean, God, yeah, I mean, the man is... I know some people have complained and said, oh, he'd be too tonally similar to the Craig films. I don't think so. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he'll be a little more serious than maybe, like, Roger Moore, but
I don't think we live in an era where you could have a Roger Moore Bond anymore.
One of his favorite films is The Spy Who Loved Me.
The Spy Who Loved Me, yeah.
He's got, like... I just rewatched the Dark Knight Trilogy in theaters for the Batman Day, and they're funny. They're fucking very funny.
They are.
So, I mean...
There's a lot of great one-liners in there, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know why people have this perception of him as being, like, humorless.
Will you be wanting the back pot, sir?
Middle of the day, Alfred? Not very subtle.
The Lamborghini, then? Much more subtle.
In any case, I don't think they would be tonally similar to the Craig films, other than they might have some, like, sort of psychological element to them, because he likes to do that, and that's a part of the character. And I mean, you can do the character without that, but I don't think post Craig anyone's going to. I think that's what people sort of expect of the character at this point.
If he were to go into this is uncharted waters, right? Like this is something that's never happened before, and I think for that reason alone, I'd be willing to give it a try. If it doesn't work, then, like, so be it. I don't think, like, I don't know if I necessarily agree that it's going to break the franchise if they try this one thing. Like, I get your reservations.
Maybe I'm being dramatic, but
I mean, because you have, like, 20. To your point, when we talk about, like, people not liking No Time to Die and us loving No Time to Die, we're like, there's 24 other movies you could go back and watch. If this film doesn't work, there's 25 other movies you can go back and watch, and at least I'll have, like... But at least they'll have gambled on something different and interesting.
I don't think it's different or interesting, though. I think my argument would be the exact same thing. I'd say, if you want a Bond film set in the 60s, we have fucking 6 of them. Go watch one of those.
And I agree with that. I agree. I totally agree with that. I'm not saying that I want to see this, but I am saying that if they're going to do that, there's a way to look back on that time period through the context of a modern lens. I just don't think that, like, I see an angle for it to work. If it does go down the road of being, like, overly reverent and just a direct adaptation of, like, Goldfinger or something like that, I don't want to see that. It would have to be something more than that would, benefit from being told in the 60s for it to work.
We don't need to go back there and do it exactly as we did it in the 60s, because we've already done it. It's done.
I mean, like, I guess that's sort of the thing, is just, like, knowing the kind of filmmaker Christopher Nolan is, like, I don't think he would be doing something that is, like, overly, like, self-referential or whatever.
Be. If you said it in the 60s, there's no way it couldn't be.
I mean, like, yeah, to your point, I get that, but also, like, I would point to the new Godzilla movie that's coming out, because, and granted, I have not seen it, but that trailer that dropped looks fantastic.
That's really good.
That's the only other franchise that has endured as long as James Bond. And they have a movie that's coming out. That I believe takes place in around World War II, if not.
I think it's post-war. Yeah, I think it's like
it is post-war.
Yeah.
Which that's the era of Godzilla. Like when the character was first came into existence, and they're putting a different spin on it that I think is making that movie really interesting, and it's also contemporary as well. So, like, I could see James Bond doing a similar thing. I want to kind of go into this, which is, ever since this news piece has dropped, there's been a lot of interesting reactions from the fans, and strangely enough, a lot of people are on board with this idea. And I'm curious, like, why do you think people are on board with a time period Bond film?
I think part of it is there is a faction of, and this is not everyone at all. Not everyone who wants this is this way, but I think there is a pretty decent contingent of people who are like, I'm sick of Bond having to be modern. I'm sick of Bond having to be politically correct. I want Bond to go back to into a time period where he's allowed to be, the smoking sexist, whatever. And I think for not everyone, a very vocal minority of people, that is the appeal of it. It's the appeal of like, well, Bond doesn't have to take orders from a woman and do all of these things anymore. That the things that we, the franchise has done to sort of keep itself relevant and modern, we don't have to do that anymore. Cubby Broccoli was incredibly smart when he realized that you have to just keep it. You got to do exactly what Fleming was doing, which is keep it contemporary. And I think the reason this idea is so popular with fans is I think it's just a misremembering or a misunderstanding. And that sounds really condescending, but it's just I think some people just think we can recapture that if we just literally go back to the 60s, and I don't think we can.
If this does end up happening, if this is the route that they choose to take, that Christopher Nolan chooses to take, we know that he's going to get carte blanche. He's going to get just all like as much creative control as Barbara Broccoli will let him have, and that will suit him. So like we know that we're going to be in good hands. That it's, I mean, Nolan has never. I mean, you can ask me, but like at least this is just my opinion. Nolan has never made a bad movie. He's never steered me wrong before. He has earned my trust as a moviegoer. It would be a good movie. Whether or not it's your Bond thing, I think is like, it remains to be seen, whatever. But I think the core of what matters is like, would it be a good movie? Would it get butts in seats? And would it get people excited about James Bond?
Butts in seats, good movie. I don't think you get people excited about James Bond as a concept. I think you get people excited about that movie. They go see that movie, and I don't think it does anything for the longevity of the series. Which
I mean, yeah, I gotta push back on that, man. I think it doesn't matter. I mean, fuck, dude, he could make a Bond movie set in the 80s or the 90s, and people would be stoked about it.
I don't think that's true, though. I think that people would get excited for that movie. I don't think it necessarily translates into making new fans. I think people become fans of that movie. They say, "Oh yeah, the Christopher Nolan."
But he's got a very dedicated. He's got a very dedicated younger audience. Like those kids.
Yeah, but
that love
you make
Tenet.
a fan of that movie. I think it's
he's gonna make three of them. He's gonna make three of them.
I think it's like the Snyder fans. You make like they're not DC fans. They are Snyder fans. And when Snyder left DC, they hate DC. Like I think that's what this is. I think it's you people. Yeah, Chris, I'm good friends with him. Nolan has this really dedicated fan base, and they would show up, and general audiences would show up, and people would probably like the movie because it's probably going to be good. But I don't think you make James Bond fans out of them because there's nothing to latch onto there. There's nothing to keep you invested in this as a sort of overarching idea. The period setting, I think that's where that rubs the wrong way. But I do have one question for you before we wrap up, because we mentioned Barbara Broccoli giving him like sort of the leeway to do this and whatnot. How likely do you think this is that let's just say
she wouldn't let it happen? No, I think that's really that's the answer we arrive at, is that
and that's why I'm gonna sleep so soundly tonight, because Babs has got my back.
Look, that is the thing. I think that she would do a lot of things to try to get Christopher Nolan. She would make a lot of concessions.
Yeah, she's not afraid to make big swings, but I don't think that's
but I think that is like, that might be the one thing where she's like, all right, can we negotiate? Can we like, you're allowed to do your thing, but like, can we just not make it a period piece? And I think I genuinely think Christopher Nolan would concede on that. I think so too. Yeah. I don't think a 60s Bond is like his sticking point. If he doesn't get this, he's out. I think there are a lot of other things that he would be more interested in doing and exploring. I guess to bring it all back, do we think Christopher Nolan is going to be in charge with spearheading the next era of James Bond? And do we want it to happen?
I think the odds are pretty good right now. Honestly, it feels weird to say that because it feels like it's been such a nebulous thing for so long. Yeah. I think if I'd be shocked. It would be such a coup if someone else got it at this point, because he is been heading in this direction for so long, and he's such a hot commodity that it makes sense that everyone else, like Amazon and Eon, would want him.
Yeah.
I want it as long as it's not a period piece. That's my
That's
my
the
caveat.
caveat. That's your
I
sticking
want it.
point. So you're with Bob.
That's my sticking
You're with
point.
Babs. You're with Babs. Yeah.
Yep, it's me and Babs, ride or die.
Yeah. Whether or not it's a period piece or not, I'm all in for this because he's earned my trust as a viewer, as a Bond fan. I know that he cares about the character. I know he cares about the franchise. So I don't think he's going to give us anything less than exceptional, whether or not it's a period piece or not. Do I think he'll get it? I don't know. I mean, it remains to be seen, but it does seem like a no-brainer. Like, where the fuck? Like, the dude is like, he's gold. He's the manifestation of profit. Why would you not want this guy to make your Bond movie, especially when you have this clean break and can start anew or whatever? And have him do a trilogy. Like, that would be great.
Oh, I love that idea. Yeah, I think him
would
doing more than one, great idea.
Yeah. The other thing that is interesting about this report that I swear to God we're going to end on is him executive producing going forward at Eon.
Yeah,
so
this is fascinating.
Like, they want him to be in charge of this thing after he's done, just to like help put it together. Do they want him to like take the place of Michael G. Wilson? Is that what they're saying? Like,
I don't know. I mean, or maybe I don't know. Yeah, did they say indefinitely, like just like going forward beyond his films, or because I know Daniel Craig was an executive producer, but
they said the goal is to get Nolan to do 2 to 3 films and then have him executive produce going forward. So post third film, he would be an executive producer on those films and would help kind of shepherd that direction. So I don't know if that means they keep the actor and then he executive produces the rest of that actor's tenure, or if they like want to bring him into the family and like have him actually be a part of Eon, which would be also really fucking cool.
Or could this be Amazon saying we need another person at the table because we can't win a negotiation between just us and the Broccolis? We need a third party here to sort of break up the argument a bit. Because I feel
Nolan is not going to side with the suits. Like, he's going to 100% be on the side of Eon. So this is going to backfire on them, and we're going to get great creative swings for like the next 20 years.
Would not be the first time a studio made a terrible decision trying to win a fight.
Yeah, for sure.
So that is fascinating, and I think he'd be good at it. I mean, obviously he understands this. He understands this, and not that an executive producer is heavily involved, but like he understands this character enough that it's not like he's just he's not a suit coming in and saying I'm now involved in these. I trust him on that front. But color me skeptical, but if we can get past this sticking point, I'm all in.
Let Chris do Bond. Let's let him do it. Just let it happen. Come on, please, for the love of God.